If you're watching on Instagram, welcome. It's great to see you. I just want to give the other platforms a chance to roll in. Why don't you go ahead, and if you're on Instagram, tell me where you're watching from right now so I can welcome you in. All right. I'm Mel Robbins. Welcome. I have not been live for a while. If you don't know me, my name is Mel Robbins. I'm a best-selling author. I am best known for writing the book, The 5-Second Rule, which has been translated into 32 languages. You can see some of those books behind me. I am also the host of the daytime syndicated talk show here in the United States, The Mel Robbins Show. And I wanted to go live because I haven't been live for a while. And I have noticed your questions piling up in the comments on social media, and also questions being directed if you go to my newsletter at melrobbins.com. And so I wanted to just take a minute and check in as the world is starting, at least here in the United States, we're starting to come out of quarantine. And you're also seeing an amazing movement take place for social justice, for police reform, and for the lives of Black men, women, and children being affirmed, protected, and elevated here in the United States. And before I jump into 3 questions that I have received that I want to answer on the topics of forgiveness, on the topic of being frustrated about having to answer the same question over and over again, and how you deal with pessimism and fear, I want to direct your attention to my social media channels everywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Yesterday, as part of the Share the Mic Now movement that was created to elevate Black women's voices, I asked a very dear friend of mine, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. She is a therapist. She's a best-selling author, to take over my social media channels. And she's been an expert on the Mel Robbins show on television over 30 times. I mean, I've got this woman on speed dial. She's an incredible therapist. She is so wise, and she created a must-watch video about the intersectionality between COVID-19 and and racism as a virus. And it is so incredible. I am telling you, please go watch it. And in addition to how her wisdom will blow your mind, she also has specific advice for white allies on what you can do right now to help Black men, women, and children move from trauma and pain and into their power. So it's a must-watch. I want to thank Dr. RG again. Please follow her on social media for taking the time to create that video and allowing me to share it with you. Okay, so let's jump into questions. The first one is from Cassandra. And if you have a question, please, by all means, just ask it in the comments. Cassandra's question is, how do you forgive people so that you can move on? So, Cassandra, here's the thing about forgiveness, that it took me a very long time to understand this, but this understanding of forgiveness will blow your mind, will free you, will literally give you the gift of your life back. Because the thing about holding a grudge, the thing about being angry, the thing about holding on to resentment is that the person that it hurts is you. And so forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is something you give to yourself. In fact, it was Maya Angelou who said that forgiveness is the greatest gift that you can give to yourself. Because forgiveness is an act of love. You cannot have love in your life if you are unable to forgive. And I think forgiveness is one of those huge lessons that every single human being is destined to learn at some point in their life. That you do have the power to forgive because you have the power to love. And so what does forgiveness mean? Forgiveness means that you are letting go of the past. You are letting go of the anger. You are letting go of the resentment. You are letting go of the judgment. You are letting go of wishing things could be different. Because when you hold on to anger, when you hold on to resentment, when you hold on to the wish that you wish something could be different, you put yourself in a prison. You put yourself mentally and emotionally into a box where you are anchored down to the trauma and to the past and to whatever it was that was done to you. And so forgiving means being able to look at what happened and say, thank you. Thank you for that, because there was a lesson in there that you learned. There was a truth that was revealed. There was some awakening that happened that made you become present in your life in a way that you hadn't been before. When you can do that, you will be truly free. Now, if you don't know how to forgive someone else, because personally, I have no problem forgiving other people. The problem that I have is typically forgiving myself for the stuff that I wish I had done differently in the past. And when it comes to forgiving yourself, I look for the message in the mess, because once I learn the lesson that I needed to learn, then I can move on from the mistakes that I've made, and I can feel empowered from the mistakes that I've made, and I can forgive myself. I also have found it's easier to forgive myself when I recognize that I was in pain and I was acting only how a person in pain acts. And it's not until you address your pain that you can become a stronger version of yourself. So those things have allowed me to forgive myself and to look myself in the mirror and say, I know I have done things that I wish I had done differently, but honestly, thank you for making those mistakes, because you learn from them and you're a better person now. When it comes to forgiving other people, you actually don't need to understand. Forgiveness is a gift. Forgiveness is a decision. Forgiveness is something that you decide to do for yourself so that you can be free. But something that helps is when you understand what happened to the other person, such that they would be in so much pain that they could do what they did. Understanding, empathy, being able to step in someone else's shoes and not necessarily understand the specific circumstances, but to connect to the emotion of that pain that they're feeling, that is where you will find the power of being able to forgive somebody for the shit that they did because of the emotional state that they were in. Doesn't excuse what they did. It simply explains it so that you can bring context, and that gives you the access point to kindness, to love, because forgiving is an act of love. And the more that you forgive yourself and other people in your life, the more you will be present to love. All right, let's go on to the next question. Danielle, I struggle with having patience at times when it comes to help teach people things, when I find myself having to repeat the directions several times. How many of you feel this? Do you get impatient when you have to teach people things and they come back to you over and over and over and over again? Do you struggle because you start to feel angry or resentful or frustrated? How can you be more patient when you're frustrated? This is an excellent question. So first of all, you have to ask yourself, if you're in a situation where somebody keeps coming back to you over and over and over again, and you have to keep explaining yourself, whether it's your boundaries or it's instructions at work or whatever, there are 3 different things that could be at play, and it's really important that you figure out which one is true for you, because all of these can create frustration. First of all, do you truly need to practice patience? Is this a situation where you're an impatient person, you're frustrated, and you need to learn how to practice patience? Or is this a situation where you've created a problem because you're always available to answer everybody's questions, which means you've created a problem where you've trained everybody to be helpless. You've trained everybody to come to you, and now you're frustrated because of the problem you've created. Or are you frustrated because you're failing to protect yourself from somebody who's a taker, who's constantly crossing boundaries and using you? Super important to understand which of these three things it is, because I have different advice. Let's start with the first one. Do you need to learn how to practice patience? This one applies to me, because when you get frustrated, when you start to feel your anger rise up, that's probably something to do with a pattern that is stored in your nervous system. That you feel your emotions come up and you get upset before you even realize what's going on. This is an issue for me. And so the number one thing that you need to do is you need to recognize that you have a pattern of getting emotionally triggered. And the number one tool that I use is the 5-second rule. When I feel myself rising up, I count backwards using the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The counting backwards creates a pause, and it creates distance between my emotional reaction of getting impatient with somebody and the distance I need to control my response to my own emotional reaction. And so practicing creating a pause between my emotional reaction of impatience before I respond has been a game changer. It hasn't removed the fact that my emotions rise up and my impatience rise up, but I've noticed that the impatience comes less and less frequently, and I have more control in most settings. Let's go on to number 2, that the reason why you're frustrated when people keep coming up and asking repeated questions is you're realizing you've created the problem. You're always available. And so you've trained everybody around you to be helpless, to not think for themselves, to not search for answers, because they know that you are basically a human Google. That, oh, I can just ask Mel, I can just ask Mandy. My business partner Mandy is that person in our company. Everybody goes to her. I'm sure it's very frustrating. But when you always answer the question, people will always come to you. And so what do? Well, this is a technique that I've started using with one of my daughters who, when she gets anxious, starts to underfunction and starts asking tons of questions that she knows the answer to. What you do to solve this problem is you, instead of answering the question, you ask leading questions. Well, what do you think you should do? Where do you think you should get the answer? My daughter just came in here. She's 20 years old. She's covered in poison ivy because she's been doing a ton of yard work because her internship and her summer camp where she was a counselor was canceled. She's covered in poison ivy. She walks in, she lifts it up. What should I do? What should I do? Instead of answering, I say, well, what do you think you should do? She said, I should call the pediatrician. I said, you're right. She said, I'm going to go call him. I said, great. Problem solved, redirected. I'm not impatient. She's now learning she can solve her own problems because she's getting redirected. Now the third, you are frustrated when people keep coming to you for help and you keep answering the same questions over and over. And you're frustrated. The third reason is because you now need to protect yourself. People are taking advantage of you. And so if that's the case, you've got to draw boundaries. Boundaries, remember, are for you. They're not for other people. A boundary you can draw is, listen, I've answered the question 3 times. I do not ask me this question again. A boundary would be, I'm starting to feel that you're taking advantage of me because you always come to me for answers for things that you could find on Google or that are in the company training manuals. So you need to stop answering me a question. Here's another way you could say that. Before you come and ask for help, I want you to come up with 3 solutions. And when you walk in here, I want you to tell me the issue you're dealing with and the 3 things that you think you could do. And then I will give you advice based on you already coming up with answers for yourself. That way you're training people to think. You're training people where your boundaries are. You can also say, hey, I'm no longer available for advice about managing your drinking. I'm no longer available for advice about how you manage your ex-husband because I don't see you taking my advice and I'm not a licensed therapist. So why don't you go somewhere to somebody where you just want to vent? You can draw boundaries that way. I see a lot of you are responding to that one. So let me know how that goes. Now the final question, we've got Roberta. Roberta from Milano. Fantastic. My question is about pessimism, anxiety, and fear about the future in general. Could it be that we are afraid of happiness, as weird as that might sound? If you are pessimistic, afraid, and you look out to the future and you feel gripped, could you be afraid of happiness? You know, I don't think people are afraid of happiness. I believe, because I know that human beings learn and repeat patterns. And when you have something that's not working, you have a pattern that's broken. I don't think you're afraid of being happy. I think that if you are constantly pessimistic or afraid or negative, a couple things could be going on. Number one, this is probably a pattern that you learned somewhere, whether you learned it from your parents or your caregivers or the people that you hang out with are negative, or you work in an environment that are negative, or you live with people who are negative. That kind of outlook is contagious. You can catch negativity. And so it's probably become a pattern and you don't realize it. The second thing that this could be is it could be an issue of self-worth. It's not that you are afraid of happiness, it's that you believe you don't deserve it because you have low self-worth. Or the third thing is that sadness, pessimism, negativity could become your identity. That you get a lot of mileage out of being sad and negative. You get attention from it. You get safety from it. Because as weird as it sounds, we crave the things that are familiar more than anything else. It goes back to patterns. If you're used to being sad, if you're used to being pessimistic, if you were raised in that kind of environment, it's familiar to you. And so you may not even know, what does it feel like to be happy and optimistic? Well, here's the good news. All of the researchers on happiness have determined that when you're born, 40% of your happiness level is preset by genetics. That means 60% of your happiness is determined by the little things you do. And even if you were raised by pessimistic people, even if your identity has become kind of like the Eeyore of the crowd, wah, 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 even if you're used to it, there are small things that you can do to bump up your level of happiness. And what I implore you to do is to take this seriously, because you can bump up your happiness level. You can become a more optimistic person. How do you do it? Well, there are some simple things that you can do. If you were to simply start exercising every day, that would go a long way. If you were to upgrade your friend group, and by up, I mean you up it to people that have an uplifting attitude. Hang out with more positive people. Follow positive people online, and it'll start to rub off on you. Learn about optimism. Optimism is not looking at a shit sandwich and telling yourself it's going to be delicious. Optimism is saying, well, I'm holding a shit sandwich, but I know based on what I do next and based on how I look at things, I can improve the sandwich that I'm holding tomorrow. It's about your belief that your thoughts matter and what you do matters, that you can have a positive impact on a negative situation. I mean, just look at the world around us. There are people taking action right now because the situation that we have in the United States is so negative and violent when it comes to racism and the discrimination against Black men, women, and children. And people are taking action, and they believe this is optimism that you are seeing. That's at the heart of a social change movement. The belief that your thoughts and your actions matter and can create a better world in this instance. And I believe that to be true. And so optimism is a skill you can learn. Happiness is something that you can impact. If you want to take on something simple, get up when the alarm rings, exercise first thing in the morning, surround yourself with positive people, and every single day, force yourself to take one small action toward a goal or a dream that you have, and you will see your optimism and your happiness start to rise. But I think the biggest takeaway of all around pessimism is fear, is if you're used to feeling that way, it's a pattern, and it's a pattern that you need to break. Because right on the other side of that broken pattern is a life that is a whole lot more fulfilling, positive, and happy. All right, everybody, I'm going to hop. It's been great hanging with you. I'm so excited. I see people, Marrakesh, tuning in from Marrakesh, from Jamaica, from Cyprus, from all over the United States, from Hong Kong. I love you. Oh my gosh, I'm leaning way too far forward. Oops. Have my broadcast been my mouth the entire time? Oh well, I should have been sitting back. Oops. I've been talking to Instagram. It's so good to see you. And I apologize, Facebook and LinkedIn. I have a feeling that you've been talking to my nose this whole time. Oopsie. Anyway, in case nobody else tells you, let me be the one to tell you that I love you, I believe in you, and I believe in your ability to change your life for the better. I believe in your ability to forgive, because it's a gift that you give to yourself. I believe in your ability to be less impatient and to practice patience and draw boundaries. And I believe in your ability to be more optimistic. That's it. I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.